Hey, it's me, Big P, and I'm here to bring you 3 different build guides for the 3 newly reworked Ascendancies that we're getting in the 3.13 Path of Exile Ritual League. Basically, I'm going to just give you a template for the way that I would start, the skills that I would use if I was starting. I am starting one of them myself. Obviously, I can't do 3 characters at once. Not that good at the game yet. My computer would explode. So yeah, I mean, you know why you're here. Let's get right into the 3 different ones. The first one I'm going to do is the Deadeye. Now this is the one that I'm actually myself going to start. I don't necessarily recommend it as the strongest one. I think this is an attack build, the other 2 are spell builds, and so generally speaking, attack builds are a little bit trickier to kind of level with. You kind of have to replace your weapons a little bit more consistently. However, the Lancing Steel Deadeye is going to be scaling Impale for a lot of flat damage, and yeah, basically it's, I mean, I did this in Mayhem, the Mayhem 1 week event earlier, and it was pretty huge. I don't know why it didn't save when I got here, but there we go. Basically, this the skill itself, as long as you get a Call of Steel skill, Jewel, it'll be fine. That is probably one of the caveats, that it is not exactly SSF friendly. You would have to go into, luckily there's Call of Steel support on the tree. We may actually anoint this ourselves if the +4 maximum steel shards is really noticeable for the Lancing Steel, since you only get 3 as the base one, I think, before you have to reload. Maybe it's technically a bit of a 2-button skill build, because you do have to reload those steel shards, but I just personally want to try it. I'm going to set it up for a bit of like a magic find early map farmer, while still being able to do a decent bit of single target. I do have a version that uses chain. This version is going to use chain, but I mean in the main links. Actually, let's go over to the skills themselves. This error has been coming up. Very fun. I guess it's worth mentioning, you can take a look in the bottom left corner. That's the current version of the POB fork that I'm using. So if you try and download one of the paste bins in the original POB or not community fork, it's not going to work. You got to do it for this. That way you can get cool error messages like I just did. Anyway, hi. See? It's when you mouse over some of them. All right, so let's not mouse over them. I'm not going to mouse over them. I'll go near them. Okay, so Lancing Steel, obviously, on the gem it has actually 20% chance to impale, and we will be running Dread Banner as an aura to give us another 20. Impale in the links gives us another 40. That brings us up to 80, and then on the tree, once we get over here, there'll be 15 and 5 on the smaller node here, so that's 100% chance to impale. A lot of flat damage, and that's a lot of times what you need early on to help you, get into it. With the maps, it sucks to have to hit your skill 5 or 6 or 7 times and then the rare mob dies. So hopefully this will mitigate that with a lot of front-loaded physical damage and a bit of overwhelming there in terms of physical damage reduction. So we also have Brutality to deal more physical damage, Maim to get the debuff and on every enemy, Vicious Projectiles, and then that's your main 5 damage link, and then you kind of have a lot of flexibility with the Deadeye with what you do on the last link. I'm going to try Fork out because I saw that in some other builds that people were doing. But I guess it really depends. You don't really get that much on the tree anymore that would mess stuff up. And I got to be honest, I'm kind of just starting to see for myself what works and what doesn't with Deadeye. For example, you might be questioning why I am going for Far Shot, particularly because the only 2 required uniques for this build are the Bell-Timbered Blades, which shouldn't be too expensive unless for some reason they're meta. Hopefully Mathil doesn't suggest something like this that uses this. And you should be able to pick one up around the first. It could go as low as like about a dozen chaos, but it should be even cheaper than that. And even if you can only get 1, you'll get those 2 additional projectiles if you've used a movement skill recently. My movement skill, of course, is going to be Dash with Blood Magic. Just because mana cost might be an issue. Your auras, you might have you have a little bit of flexibility, not really so much in the Dread banner, but Precision and Herald of Purity you don't have to use necessarily. You could go for Pride, but that might be on a tree that takes point blank. I am not so sold on it, but I might take it eventually. Yeah, but the tree's nothing fancy. So I would first go for Gathering Winds, because Tailwind is going to feel absolutely incredible at first. As your first point, it'll just help you get through faster. And my second one's going to be the Ricochet. Just to give it a try, it's going to help you clear. Not really give you that much more single target damage, unfortunately. We did lose the 10% more damage per chain on this. So I'm not going to be running it in main links because it's too big of a damage hit. And yeah, Endless Munitions is just a lot of damage. I mean, it's went up from 1 to 2 now. So, I mean, I think we're going to feel that a bunch. And then the last one, if Far Shot, if the projectile barrages have no spread, applies to Lancing Steel, I don't think it will. This probably only applies to, obviously, the barrage attack itself and any skills that you can support with barrage, the barrage support gem. That's really all it's going to work for. So, can't really, you know, I can't say for sure until I, you know, put the point in the Ascendancy myself and then do it. So, you know, give me the first day or two of the league, and then you can come ask me whether or not it works. I don't think it will. Lancing Steel is kind of like a barrage, and I'm hoping it will, because if it will, the biggest weakness of Lancing Steel is that it kind of like, it's like a little bleh, like, especially if I'm going to use Fork. Again, we'll see. If I can support Lancing Steel with barrage, I don't think you can. Actually, I should have checked that before. That use bows or wands. There you go. Nope. Yeah, no, we know. It's not gonna work. Get out of here. Yeah. So, honestly, let's save that it is. So, if this doesn't work, obviously we're gonna go for Wind Ward. Wind Ward is huge between this. I mean, we probably should go anyway. I cannot imagine this will work, and we'll have Far Shot anyway. So it's kind of a waste of an Ascendancy point. Honestly, let's just take it out right now. I myself am going to experiment with this, or at least consult with somebody else who has tried it to confirm it for myself. However, if it does work with Lancing Steel, it could be huge. That's all I'm really going to go over for this build. I guess it's there is a two-handed sword version with Terminus S that I did in the Mayhem League. It's a Void League, so it's using the old Deadeye. You would probably have to adjust it. I'll still post the paste bin under it in case you want a two-handed tree. It kind of goes further over. Mayhem was a little bit, you know, crowded and crazy, and the fact that it still did so solidly there makes me want to start it again here. It's going to be nice and fast, a lot of front-loaded damage. The other one went into like Call of Arms and like a bunch of stuff over here. I think we went up to these Impale nodes instead. Yeah, so stuff like that. But anyway, that's the Lancing Steel Deadeye. That's what I'm going to do. The next one, yeah, save it, fuck it, that I would recommend myself is the Blade Vortex Inquisitor. Inquisitor is definitely an Ascendancy I'm going to try at least once this league. They got a bunch of interesting buffs, and the rework is quite interesting. However, the build that I'm using here is not very, you know, out there. It's pretty tried and tested and true. Elemental conversion. Blade Vortex might actually be the new standard, and now that the Assassin Blade Vortex has been nerfed so drastically. And that's fine with me, because I've been doing this. This is the build that got me to Metamorphs. I was shredding Metamorphs in the Metamorph League and fighting all my Conquerors for the first time back then. This is actually an imported build that I took straight from the character. So there are some caveats. Obviously, you're going to look at the items and see a lot of stuff here. The only thing that is necessary, I would say, is a Hrim Burn, or at least a Hrim Sorrow, because between these gloves, which convert 50% of physical to cold, and the Fizz to Lightning and the Blade Vortex, you are an elemental build. Unfortunately, the only thing that the build has really lost here is the effect of non-damaging ailments. That's Chill, Freeze, and Shock. It remains to be seen how much this is actually going to affect the build in terms of both DPS and playability. but it shouldn't be that big of a deal because we still will be critting, so we'll be applying a lot of the freeze and the chill and the shock with our damage split between cold and lightning damage. I didn't have access to Thunderous Salvos. They added it the patch after, I think. So this is actually an improved version of a build. And if you don't like going all the way down here, if you want to be a little bit more soft core about it, I had a decent amount of life because of the increased life from the tree, and not to mention pretty decent gear, particularly my +2. This was my double corrupted Carcass Jack that was like my big lottery hit of the league. However, not even close to necessary for the build. The only reason I got this was I got the double corrupt temple thing myself, and I wanted to show my friend how to do it. I brought a tabula into the temple with me because I was very ready to see my 6th link Carcass Jack disappear and do the rest with the tabula, which is what you would probably do. Everything else, Yoke of Suffering might not be as good as something like Ascendancies now, because stat stacking is going to be sort of a thing that it's going to build a lot in terms of both raw stats, obviously, but critical strike chance as well for the Inquisitor. So definitely worth taking a look into there. Everything else is, Starcon just helps you get Dex, but you might not need this again if you go for an Astromentus, so then you can free that up for another Helm slot. There's a lot of options you can get. Again, the only thing that you absolutely really need is the From Sorrow, and even then, there's some other options, such as you can path, this one's a little bit further, you can path down to Magmatic Strikes. I'm not so turned off from fire as an elemental damage type now that we don't have non-damaging ailments stuck on the Inquisitor, kind of discouraging us from using that. Like, that's okay. So yeah, there's this version wasn't glancing blows or anything, but it ended up being pretty tanky because we do go into the life wheel here. Otherwise, it's a very generic spell crit tree that, if you don't like Blade Vortex, should be very easy to respec into something like I was considering Glacial Cascade. I was considering, what else? If I wanted to try Battle Mage and Instruments of Zeal, I could do Ice Crash, and Frost Bomb maybe got buffed. Glacial Cascade is nice. There's a lot of options. Basically, I would set up the Inquisitor like this. You do Sanctuary first, then Righteous Providence, then Pious Path, then Inevitable Judgment. Pious Path you want at least when you start mapping, because it'll be nice to not be frozen. I mean, I guess you can even get this first if you really want to. I mean, well, obviously not first because you have to go to Sanctuary first. But yeah, not too much to say about that. If you have any questions, this is pulled straight from a kind of an older guide, but the tree should be still pretty consistent, pretty stable. The only things I might drop is maybe this stuff here, although maybe you do want the increased effect of non-damaging ailments here, now that we lost it on the Ascendancy itself. And in terms of things you can anoint, you can do Static Blows here, and if you don't come down here, you anoint this. Otherwise, you can also anoint Exceptional Performance for even more skill effect duration on your Blade Vortex if you don't want to cast it a bunch. But I mean, back in my day, Blade Vortex had 20 stacks and we didn't have Unleash. You guys get to click once and get 4. If you go there, you get 4 blades. What is that? No Spell Echo, none of that shit. My dude was using faster casting back in the day, in your main links. But anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on this one because this one's not that interesting. It's I'm pretty sure I have at least 1 or 2 videos on it of me killing Metamorphs and stuff. Or maybe I didn't kill the Metamorph in that video. Was that the one where I skipped it? Either way, Blade Vortex Inquisitor, Elemental Conversion, should be very strong, very safe. Unfortunately, I do not use the... Oh, hey, get out of here. The new stuff here, that's fine. This is a more consistent and solid version that I can more safely recommend. It remains to be seen how doable. Instruments of Virtue is going to be nice. Instruments of Zeal will take a little bit more tinkering. I think it's going to be a little bit more conditional than you might have bargained for. But anyway, let's go to the last one. The last one, which I almost want to do after looking at New Elementalist for so much, is Crackling Lance Elementalist. So I'm going to start by saying right now, if you think the Crackling Lance is a bad skill, you're kind of right, but I also think you just need to get good and hit with the Crackling Lance itself. I see a lot of unfair comparisons being made to Arc, which automatically chains several times and clears far better than Crackling Lance ever could. However, the single target of Arc will fall very, very short very quickly unless you get really good gear or other stuff, whereas Crackling Lance, especially now that the gem's being buffed, will be amazing. I started this for Heist. It was an Inquisitor. However, there are some parts of the Elementalist that make me kind of drool. I almost want to do this instead because it might be more consistent, if not a little bit less tanky, I would say. Inquisitor is not really tanky. But yeah, it's a pretty generic crit tree, spell tree. It's very similar actually to the previous one. But we do have some interesting options in terms of defensive layers. So this is kind of like if I get an Essence Worm and put the one aura that I'll be using into here, I can go Mind Over Matter with maybe just reserving a Clarity if it's really that big of an issue. If I don't have that much innate mana regen, although we do get, I really didn't even consider regenerate 1% of mana per second. That's going to be up all the time. So if you scale a little bit of your mana, it really shouldn't be an issue at all. But yeah, the tree, I go up to here. I feel like, considering that Shaper of Storms makes hits always shock. Every single enemy will be shocked. All damage with hits can shock. I mean, we're not going to do anything fancy. You can do a cold conversion that I did with the Call of the Brotherhood and split your damage 2 ways, and that would make the Crackling Lance a little bit crunchier and clear better with ice explosions and things like that. But yeah, shocks from your hits always increase damage taken by at least 15% is going to be huge against bosses, and more effect of lightning ailments you inflict with hits. It's going to be crazy, and I think that it will stack nicely with Breath of Lightning and even Heart of Thunder, penetrating 6% here. I forgot that we're going to need to inflict exposure somewhere in the skills here. So much so that Orb of Storms that I normally recommend might actually be Wave of Conviction. I'll have to see if I do that. But I guess I think maybe I would go Shaper of Storms first, then Mastermind of Discord, then the Golem, Liege of the Primordial. I think you can kind of just throw some Golems into a build and just give it a nice big boost, especially for your first build of the League. As a starter, you're going to be kind of like, you might have some weak pieces of gear here and there. The Golems that I've chosen, I don't really know much about Golems, so I get +1 Golem here and +1 Golem here because we're already up here because we're going into here. I chose Lightning, Stone, and Chaos for a little bit of cast speed, and then just more tankiness. And then I put Predator Support on them just so you can get them to focus. I don't know if the Golem damage is actually going to be that significant enough to justify this. You might just leave this as a 3-link. I don't think I picked any items for this build, except, of course, you can go for the Essence Worm if you want to go for the Mind Over Matter and have your full mana uncovered. You would put either Wrath or Zealotry, depending on which one would actually boost your damage more, in that Essence Worm, and then just have a bunch of effective HP on top of your HP pool. Otherwise, you can do any number of things, depending on what you need in your build. If you need some flat damage, put Herald of Thunder. If you need mana regen, put Clarity. If you need more crit strike, put Precision. Wrath and or Zealotry could maybe be used together with an Enlighten, and then a Clarity as well. Again, you're going to have to tinker with the actual auras that you use a little bit, depending on what your build lacks, but it shouldn't be that hard to figure out. Crackling Lance itself uses Intensify, it's built into the gem, and then you scale crit with Inspiration and crit strikes. Flat Lightning is just going to be huge. It's a little spiky, but that's totally fine. And then Lightning Pen on top of, you can use a Hex Touch, or you could even self-cast Conductivity. You could also maybe go for Elemental Weakness if you're converting some to cold with the Call of the Brotherhood. Yeah, basically there's you can set up the skill and then tweak it as you go. I focused on cast speed a little bit here and there, like I went into nimbleness and this because I feel like it really helps Crackling Lance feel more effective. They didn't really buff the cast speed at all. And you can drop the area nodes here if you feel like you have enough damage. And go into more, there's not much life that you can go into. You can maybe try to get into Purity of Flesh, but another option you have is dropping this and then going all the way into the life wheel here if you want to make it a little bit more hardcore viable. Not that I would really do an elementalist as hardcore. But speaking of which, you could also maybe go for Bastion of Elements. I'm not really so familiar with these sorts of Aegis skills. They say that they've been buffed and maybe they're sleeper OP. You know, any sort of defensive layer you can get on a sort of weak Ascendancy, or rather squishy Ascendancy, let's call it, like Elementalist, is definitely going to help you out. But yeah, I don't want this video to be super duper long, even though we went over 3 build guides lightly. Mostly it's really just a POB and some skills for reference. If you want to try any of these, if you're going to try any of these, or if you have any questions about any sorts of, you know, different styles or takes, or if you have some parts in the tree that I might have overlooked, please let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe, because we're going to go crazy with builds this league. I'm sure getting some computer upgrades in this pretty early into the league, so hopefully I don't accidentally brick it when I'm putting it all together, so we can keep the channel going, keep the chaos flowing. And do we kill Maven? I think we fight Maven, or at least entertain the Maven. Whatever, the lore, I can't wait for all of it. I can't wait to play in 2 days. By this time in 2 days we'll be in it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Good luck.